The Prince, unveiling Machiavelli's timeless lessons on power. The Prince, The Ruthless Guide to Power by Niccolò Machiavelli. What does it take to seize power and, more importantly, to keep it? The Prince by Niccolò Machiavelli is one of the most controversial political books of all time. Written over 500 years ago, its lessons still influence leaders today. But are Machiavelli's ideas purely ruthless, or is there hidden wisdom behind his philosophy? Stay with us as we uncover the key lessons from this political masterpiece. Machiavelli believed that politics is not about morality, it's about power. He argued that rulers must be willing to do whatever it takes to maintain control, because a leader who is too kind, too trusting, or too idealistic will not survive. Power is not about being good, it's about being effective. According to Machiavelli, successful rulers are not necessarily the most virtuous, but the most pragmatic. He famously stated, "It is better to be feared than loved, if you cannot be both." But why? Because fear ensures loyalty, while love is fickle and unreliable. A leader who relies on love may find that when times become difficult, their followers abandon them, whereas fear instills discipline and order. Machiavelli observed historical leaders who lost power due to excessive kindness and a naive belief in human loyalty. He studied figures such as Girolamo Savonarola, a Florentine leader who promoted religious virtue but was ultimately overthrown and executed when the tides of power shifted. His failure to balance fear and love made him vulnerable. Appearances matter more than reality. A ruler does not need to be truly good. He only needs to appear good. Machiavelli advises leaders to maintain an image of virtue while secretly using manipulation, deception, and, when necessary, brutality to maintain order. He emphasizes that the masses judge based on appearances, not actions. He gives the example of Cesare Borgia, a Renaissance ruler who was ruthless in eliminating enemies but maintained a reputation for justice and efficiency. Borgia's cunning use of image control allowed him to govern effectively until political misfortune struck. His example illustrates Machiavelli's belief that power is maintained by those who know how to control perceptions. Fortune favors the bold. Machiavelli compares fortune to a river that floods unpredictably. He argues that great rulers must not wait for fate to favor them. They must act decisively and take control of their own destiny. Hesitation is the enemy of power. He contrasts leaders who act aggressively with those who are overly cautious. For example, Ferdinand of Aragon expanded his kingdom through bold military campaigns, while other rulers hesitated and lost influence. Machiavelli warns that leaders who wait for the perfect moment will be left behind, as opportunities in politics are fleeting. Fear and respect over kindness. While kindness and generosity may seem like noble qualities, Machiavelli warns against excessive generosity, which can lead to financial ruin and a weakened position. Leaders who constantly give without ensuring their own security will eventually lose everything. Instead, he suggests calculated generosity, helping the people when it serves the ruler's long-term interests. He argues that a ruler should inspire fear, but not hatred. Fear maintains order, but hatred leads to rebellion. Leaders must find a delicate balance to ensure they remain respected and in control. Politics is a game of strategy, not morality. Machiavelli dismisses the idea that rulers should always be moral and ethical. He sees politics as a game of power, where the ends justify the means. Leaders who cling too strongly to ideals of fairness and honesty may find themselves overthrown by those who are willing to bend the rules. For example, Machiavelli admired Roman Emperor Augustus, who consolidated power by carefully eliminating rivals while maintaining a public image of a just and benevolent ruler. His ability to use deception and force strategically allowed him to create a stable empire. Adaptability is the key to longevity. A great ruler must be adaptable. Machiavelli argues that the most successful leaders know when to be aggressive and when to be cautious. They must be able to shift tactics based on circumstances. He uses the example of Pope Alexander VI, who was highly skilled at manipulation and diplomacy. His ability to adapt to shifting political alliances allowed him to maintain power for years. Leaders who rigidly stick to one approach often fail when the situation changes. The role of military strength in power. Machiavelli believed that a ruler must have control over a strong military force. A leader who cannot defend his territory will inevitably lose it. He warns against relying on mercenaries or allies for protection, as they are unreliable and self-interested. He highlights the success of rulers who built their power through strong military foundations, such as the Romans. They maintained dominance by ensuring their armies were disciplined, well-trained, and loyal to the state, rather than to individual generals. So how does a ruler gain power and hold on to it? Machiavelli offers strategies that have shaped the thinking of politicians, CEOs, and military leaders for centuries. The ends justify the means. One of Machiavelli's most famous and controversial ideas is that leaders must do whatever it takes to maintain power, even if it means using deception, fear, or violence. He argues that morality is a luxury that rulers cannot always afford. A prime example is Napoleon Bonaparte, who understood the importance of ruthless efficiency. His ability to balance diplomacy with military aggression allowed him to expand his empire across Europe. Machiavelli would argue that Napoleon's pragmatic approach to power was the reason for his success, until he overextended. Avoid being hated. While Machiavelli says it is better to be feared than loved, he warns against being hated. A leader who is excessively cruel, taxes his people too heavily, or is seen as weak will eventually be overthrown. The key is to be feared, but respected. A modern example is Lee Kuan Yew, the founding father of Singapore. He ruled with an iron fist, but his strategic governance transformed Singapore into one of the most prosperous nations in the world. His strict policies made him feared, but his effectiveness earned him respect. Control the narrative. Perception is everything. Machiavelli advises rulers to control the stories that are told about them. If the people believe their ruler is wise, strong, and just, they will follow, even if that perception is carefully crafted. One historical example is Julius Caesar, who used public speeches and grand public works projects to solidify his image as a man of the people. Even though he accumulated vast personal power, the public viewed him as their champion. Political alliances and betrayals. Machiavelli warns rulers to be cautious about whom they trust. Alliances can be useful, but they should never be relied upon too much. A leader must always be prepared for betrayal. This was evident during the reign of Henry VIII, who shifted alliances between France and the Holy Roman Empire multiple times, always ensuring that he played one side against the other. His ability to navigate political betrayals allowed him to remain in power despite constant threats. The use of fear to maintain control. Fear is a tool that must be used strategically. A ruler does not always need to use violence, but he must make his enemies believe that he is willing to. The mere threat of force is often enough to maintain order. One example is the Cold War era doctrine of mutually assured destruction, MAD. The United States and the Soviet Union avoided direct war because both nations understood that nuclear retaliation would be catastrophic. The mere possibility of destruction was enough to maintain peace, an application of Machiavellian strategy on a global scale. The importance of military strength. Machiavelli strongly emphasizes the necessity of military power. A ruler who cannot defend his territory will lose it. He advises rulers to maintain their own standing army rather than rely on mercenaries or allies. This principle was followed by the Romans, whose disciplined, professional army allowed them to dominate the Mediterranean for centuries. In contrast, the Italian city-states of Machiavelli's time often relied on mercenaries, which led to frequent instability and defeat. Never let your guard down. Complacency is dangerous. A ruler who assumes his power is secure and stops preparing for challenges will be overthrown. Machiavelli emphasizes that even in times of peace, a wise leader prepares for war. A clear example is the fall of the Byzantine Empire. For centuries, the Byzantines relied on diplomacy rather than military readiness. When the Ottoman Empire finally attacked in 1453, Constantinople fell because its defenses were weak. Machiavelli would argue that their failure was due to a lack of constant vigilance. A ruler must learn to adapt. Machiavelli argues that no strategy works forever. A ruler must be able to shift tactics based on circumstances. Those who refuse to adapt will eventually fail. A striking example is Franklin D. Roosevelt, who navigated the Great Depression and World War II by constantly adjusting his policies. He was willing to experiment with new economic strategies, alliances, and even shifting military tactics when necessary. His adaptability allowed him to maintain power longer than any other US president. The importance of military strength and leadership. A ruler who cannot defend his power will lose it. Machiavelli emphasizes the importance of military strength, arguing that war is not just an occasional necessity, it is a fundamental part of leadership. A weak leader is a doomed leader, and history proves this time and time again. A prince must be ready for war. Machiavelli warns that rulers who rely on mercenaries or foreign alliances for defense will eventually fall. A strong leader must always be prepared for conflict and must personally oversee military matters. War is not just about fighting, it is about strategy, deterrence, and preparation. Take Frederick the Great of Prussia, who built one of the most formidable armies in Europe and used military discipline to establish Prussia as a major power. His readiness for war deterred enemies and ensured his nation's survival. Fear is a powerful weapon. A ruler does not always need to use violence, but he must make his enemies believe that he is willing to. The mere threat of force is often enough to maintain order. If a ruler appears weak, he invites rebellion and invasion. A prime example is how the Roman Empire maintained control through its vast legions and reputation for brutal retaliation against revolts. The knowledge that Rome would destroy any province that defied it kept the empire stable for centuries. Never let your guard down. Complacency is dangerous. A ruler who assumes his power is secure and stops preparing for challenges will be overthrown. Machiavelli emphasizes that even in times of peace, a wise leader prepares for war. The fall of the Byzantine Empire is a clear example. Despite having the wealth and resources to maintain strong defenses, Byzantine rulers neglected military readiness. When the Ottoman Empire finally attacked in 1453, Constantinople fell because its leaders had not properly fortified the city. A state's military must be loyal to the leader. Machiavelli criticizes rulers who depend on mercenaries, arguing that they are unreliable, disloyal, and often turn against their employers. A prince must build his own forces and ensure their loyalty. This is evident in the difference between mercenary-based armies, like those of the Italian city-states, which often collapsed due to betrayal, and national armies, like that of the Roman Republic, which remained loyal to Rome itself. Military strength equals political stability. A leader with a strong military not only deters foreign enemies, but also controls internal dissent. A well-trained army can be the ultimate tool for maintaining order within the state. Napoleon Bonaparte's rise to power was largely due to his ability to command the loyalty of his soldiers. His army was not just a military force, it was the foundation of his political rule. Strategic warfare versus reckless aggression. While Machiavelli advocates for military strength, he also warns against reckless aggression. War should always be a calculated decision, not an emotional reaction. Leaders who engage in unnecessary wars often destroy themselves. Hitler's invasion of the Soviet Union in World War II serves as a prime example of reckless aggression. Instead of consolidating power, he overextended his forces, leading to his downfall. Machiavelli would argue that leaders should know when to fight and when to hold back. Control resources and supply chains. A strong leader understands that war is not just about soldiers and weapons, it is about controlling resources. A prince who does not manage food, wealth, and supplies will see his army fail. The American Civil War provides an example. The Union's ability to control supply lines, industry, and resources gave them a decisive advantage over the Confederacy. Machiavelli's principles on war extend beyond the battlefield to economic and logistical strategy. Diplomacy as a weapon. While Machiavelli champions military strength, he also acknowledges the power of diplomacy. A wise leader does not always need to go to war. Sometimes forming alliances and using deception can be even more effective. One of history's best examples is Otto von Bismarck, the architect of German unification. He skillfully used alliances, treaties, and careful manipulation to strengthen Prussia and later unify Germany without resorting to constant warfare. So is Machiavelli's The Prince a ruthless guide for dictators or a realistic blueprint for leadership? His ideas may be controversial, but they have shaped the way leaders think for centuries. Do you think leaders should follow Machiavelli's advice, or is there a better way to govern? Let us know in the comments. Subscribe for more deep dive discussions on history, philosophy, and power. Next episode, The Fall of the Roman Empire by Edward Gibbon.